Beneath the crumbling ruins of Montségur, where the wind echoed through the stone bones of the Cathar fortress, a parchment older than memory was unearthed. It was wrapped in crimson-dyed lambskin and sealed with a sigil that bore no known origin. An aurora boreas surrounding an inverted ziggurat. The language on the scroll was not Latin, Greek, or Hebrew, but a fusion of cuneiform and Proto-Etruscan, marked with alchemical glyphs. At its heart, repeated like a chant or a warning, were 6 words: as above, so below, as within. Dr. Elias Varon, a semi-disgraced symbologist whose previous theories had been laughed out of the academic halls, was the first to touch the scroll in centuries. When he did, he swore he heard a vibration in the air, like the harmonic ring of a bell submerged in black water. Though he had spent decades studying the Hermetic axiom, he realized in that moment he had never truly understood it. 2 days later, Varon vanished. His hotel room was left untouched, his suitcase still packed, and his wallet on the nightstand. The only clue was a single word scratched into the mirror in what appeared to be iron oxide: reflection. Police dismissed it, but those in the Order of the Closed Eye, an underground Hermetic brotherhood dating back to the Babylonian star priests, knew what had begun. The scroll was not a map, nor was it prophecy. It was a key, a guide to synchronizing the heavens and the earth through what the ancients called the divine ratio. Each line corresponded not just to celestial alignments, but to geologic strata beneath sacred sites: Göbekli Tepe, the Osirian, Shavin de Huantar. These sites were not simply ancient temples, they were tuning forks. At the Vatican Apostolic Archive, hidden behind 3 biometric layers and accessible to only 7 living men, a document was retrieved. The last time it was touched was during the First Crusade. It was known simply as the tabula inversa, or the inverted map. According to legend, it was dictated by a being of impossible form, who appeared in a mirror during the consecration of Saint Bernard. The map revealed something horrifying. Each major cataclysm in history, from the fall of Rome to the Tunguska event, correlated precisely with astral alignments above specific terrestrial points. The destruction was not random, it was ritual, or worse, reaction. But something new was happening. Telescopic scans from Lucia Observatory had identified a subtle distortion, like gravitational lensing occurring in constellations associated with ancient gods: Orion, Draco, and Pleiades. The distortion repeated every 33 days. When overlaid with the inverted map, the intersection points matched perfectly with seismic anomalies beneath dormant sacred sites. In Peru, at the Temple of the Sun, a hidden chamber opened during the solstice. Inside, archaeologists found a mirror made not of glass, but of a polished black stone not native to Earth. An ancient object rumored in Incan legend to have shown men the dreaming place of gods. One researcher touched it and collapsed, muttering in dead Sumerian. Every civilization had their version of the phrase, as above, so below. The Egyptians carved it into sarcophagi. The Hindus inscribed it in the Vedas. The Maya represented it with the twin-headed serpent. But always it came with the same warning: do not reverse the order. Dr. Miriam Harrow, a linguistic archaeologist and former member of a classified DARPA project on sacred geometry, began piecing together the fragments. She noticed something chilling. At key world events, like the signing of the Magna Carta or the detonation at Hiroshima, the planetary alignments were exact mirror images of those recorded in Babylonian sky charts, and yet reversed. The pattern was not only repeating, it was accelerating. There was one more phrase hidden in the scroll, obscured in ink only visible under ultraviolet light. Translated loosely, it read, "When the mirror cracks, the sleeper will stir." Scholars initially believed this was metaphorical, but seismic monitors near Lake Vostok, Antarctica, an area untouched by human eyes for millennia, began detecting rhythmic pulses, not tectonic, not glacial, deliberate. A covert satellite mission codenamed Project Halcyon was launched. Its goal? Survey deep glacial anomalies using scalar resonance imaging. What it revealed defied logic. A geometric structure, 12-sided, matching the dimensions of the dodecahedron of Plato. Beneath that, a chasm. Beneath the chasm, movement. A message was received through ELF, extremely low-frequency channels across 3 continents, identical down to the millisecond. It wasn't in any known language, but when processed through the same mathematical ratios found in Pythagorean harmonics, it became clear the message was musical, recursive, and encoded with coordinates. A council met in absolute secrecy beneath Mount Athos. Elders from 7 secret orders, most believed to have dissolved centuries ago, debated the same dilemma the Babylonians faced: should the mirror be sealed or shattered? Each option carried ruin, but the balance had already begun to tip. One final clue was found etched into the walls of the hypogeum in Malta. Deep underground, behind a false wall, an untouched chamber held a fresco depicting a man suspended between stars and roots. Beneath him, an inscription older than Phoenician, older even than Proto-Sumerian. Harrow translated it as, "Do not awaken the breath beneath the stone, unless you wish to remember what silence buried." Now, with magnetic fields weakening, auroras flickering in equatorial skies, and dreams reported simultaneously by people across the globe, dreams of inverted cities and mirrored oceans, something ancient stirs. The phrase once whispered in temples and carved into tombs is no longer symbolic. It is instruction. It is invocation. And still, the scroll speaks, not in words, but in vibration. An inaudible hum beneath the world's feet, synchronized with the heartbeat of constellations. The stars, once cold and silent, now shimmer with intent. Reflections multiply, doorways prepare to open, and somewhere, deep in the silence of Antarctica, the mirror cracks. The below rises, the above watches, and the threshold begins to thin. The cracking of the mirror beneath the Antarctic ice was not heard, but felt. Infrasound monitors stationed at weather outposts thousands of miles apart all registered the same tremor, 17 hertz, the frequency of dread. To the trained ear, it resembled a slow chant, ancient and deliberate. Frequencies like this had been recorded only once before, at the Temple of Hathor in Dendera, when a hidden shaft was accidentally struck by a seismic probe in 1968. The probe melted within seconds. When Dr. Miriam Harrow reviewed the Dendera recordings alongside the new Antarctic data, the waveforms aligned. Not similar, identical. Thousands of years, continents apart, yet bound by the same harmonic fingerprint. Something was using the Earth's crust as a speaker, and it was repeating the same chord again and again, as if trying to resurrect a memory. Satellite footage from Halcyon 7 was abruptly redacted, but a single frame, leaked through unknown channels, began circulating among deep web hermetic forums. It showed a fissure, perfectly circular, opening beneath the Ross ice shelf. Within it, a spiral of symbols carved into bedrock, glyphs matching those found in the Book of Enoch's apocryphal chapter, long thought lost to the flames of the Library of Alexandria. In Istanbul, a vault beneath the Hagia Sophia was opened for the first time since the Ottoman Empire. Inside was a metal cube the size of a man's heart, cold to the touch but vibrating faintly. It bore no seams, no hinges, yet when the Antarctic frequency was played near it, the cube emitted a light that bypassed shadow. Reflected on the walls was a single phrase in Syriac: "The below has been mirrored in error." Ancient mystics always warned of the dual nature of the phrase "as above, so below." To balance was to observe, to mirror was to bind, but to invert was to awaken something unnatural. A reversal of intention so profound it would blur the laws of causality. The ancients didn't merely map the stars, they built cages out of stone, ziggurats, pyramids, dolmens, anchoring celestial movement so the heavens would not shift freely. In France, beneath the sealed tomb of Nicolas Flamel, known alchemist and alleged immortal, a newly discovered chamber was found. At its center, a silver disc suspended in a liquid that did not reflect. The disc spun slowly, independent of any known force. On its rim, an inscription in ancient Aramaic that read, "Turn not the wheel above, lest the one below wakes and demands its place." Meanwhile, geomagnetic anomalies began appearing across ley lines, the invisible energy veins once dismissed as superstition. Birds flew in reverse patterns, clocks in London's underground stations began to tick backward, precisely at 3:33 a.m. local time. The Vatican denied all knowledge, though internal memos referred to the Time Reversal Protocol, a contingency plan first drafted in 1346. But it was in the Mariana Trench that the most disturbing evidence emerged. A robotic submersible lost contact after descending past Challenger Deep. Its final transmission was a single image, a structure embedded in the trench wall, cyclopean, symmetrical, and ancient beyond comprehension. Etched along its base were mirrored constellations that do not yet exist. Dr. Harrow presented her findings at a closed-door symposium attended by astrophysicists, theosophists, and members of the Shadow Archive, an unofficial council of archivists guarding heretical texts. Her conclusion was simple but shattering. The axiom was not philosophy, it was an equation. The celestial dome and the lithic crust were entangled in a resonance field. One had been tampered with, the other was reacting. More scrolls were found, sealed within quartz tubes buried beneath Teotihuacan's Pyramid of the Sun. When assembled, they formed a cosmic diagram. At the center, a reversed tree of life, not Sephiroth, but anti-Sephiroth, a roadmap not to ascension, but to descent. CERN, long believed to be a particle research facility, began quietly dismantling parts of its collider, not out of failure but fear. Harrow had linked the collider's most recent magnetic surges with the Dendera frequency. Each activation had caused a distortion in localized reality fields, objects vanishing, reappearing mirrored, reversed. One scientist claimed he saw his own future corpse in a reflective panel. He has not spoken since. All eyes now turned to the Great Pyramid of Giza. For centuries it had been a mystery, its shafts, alignments, and core resonances pointing to Orion and Sirius. But recent scans using muon tomography revealed something buried deeper. A chamber not filled with air, but silence so dense it registered as negative decibels. Inside, a black sarcophagus. No carvings, only a mirrored obsidian surface, untouched, untouchable. And so the mirror turns. The heavens above flicker with misalignment. Constellations shift subtly each night. The earth groans in tones only the awakened can hear. Time bends. Dreams twist into visions of a skyless world where cities hover and oceans rise into the void. Somewhere beneath the ice, the mirror spins faster. The phrase is whispered now in places once thought forgotten. Caves in Mongolia, tombs in Sudan, monasteries etched into Himalayan stone. Always the same voice in different tongues. Always the same 6 words. As above, so below, as within, and in the silence between the echoes something listens. The mirror is not cracked, it is opening. When the resonance reached Jerusalem, it didn't manifest as sound, but as absence. For 11 minutes and 33 seconds, all electronic instruments within a 10-mile radius of the Temple Mount recorded 0 signal. Not static, not failure, just nothing. A void of data, as if reality itself had been momentarily redacted. A fragment of copper scroll unearthed beneath the western wall during unauthorized excavations bore a cryptic inscribed glyph, half Sumerian, half unknown. Linguists, theologians, and physicists debated its meaning until a Kabbalistic scholar named Eliezer Tammuz inverted the scroll and deciphered it backward. The translation read, The mirror is the altar. The offering is causality. Across the world, in the Peruvian Andes, an obsidian disk buried beneath the ruins of a pre-Incan city began to hum. Locals, long silenced by academic institutions, claimed this disk was the Ojo del Mundo, the eye of the world. Their ancestors had warned that it would awaken when the sky no longer knew its place. Its vibration, when amplified, matched the Antarctic frequency and then inverted. In a forgotten vault beneath the Vatican archives, classified under a designation known only as Speculum Dei, a codex bound in woven gold was retrieved under emergency protocol. The pages, written in reverse Latin, detailed the Fractura Caeli, or Heaven's Break, a cycle of inversion that occurs not when the stars change position, but when mankind learns how to move them. At CERN, emergency fail-safes had failed. The collider's inner magnets reversed polarity without command, and the particle stream bent inward. Where protons should have collided, nothing appeared, just a tear in the data, a blank column, like a scar in time. A researcher, moments before disappearing, wrote a single phrase in chalk on the wall. As below, so it rises. In the silence that followed, certain monasteries reopened ancient reliquaries that had not seen light since the time of Charlemagne. One such relic, known as the Black Sphere of Sutri, was brought into a room lined with hematite, obsidian, and salt. It began to spin, not from an external force, but as if aligning itself with a signal buried deep within the planet. The patterns were undeniable. Monuments across the earth were lighting up in the same sequence: Göbekli Tepe, Nan Madol, Baalbek, Tiahuanaco, Giza. Not with electricity but resonance. Deep, low frequencies causing stones to subtly vibrate. These were not places of worship, they were tuning forks, designed to hold the sky in place. Dr. Harrow, now in hiding after the Geneva breach, communicated with a hidden network of mystics and quantum cryptographers. They had discovered what she called the inverted equation, a formula buried in the emerald tablet itself, written in layers of symbolic math and alchemical cipher. When transcribed using a mirrored Fibonacci spiral, it revealed a prophecy. The world will mirror itself not in light, but in will. Meanwhile, seismic anomalies began forming concentric circles under the Pacific, centered near an uninhabited atoll. When sonar was fired into its depths, the echo didn't bounce. It answered. The return signal came back with an unnatural delay and an encoded pattern. It translated as, "The seal has reversed. The mirror is now the gate." As astronomers mapped gravitational shifts across known space, something even more disturbing was observed. Star systems had begun mimicking ancient glyphs, patterns visible only from Earth's position, constellations warping slowly into sigils last seen carved into the tombs of forgotten priest-kings, and alchemical diagrams sealed in lead. In the Kazakh steppe, a cave, closed since the Bronze Age, opened following a deep tremor. Inside, a series of murals depicted a war not between men, but between reflections. Figures identical yet inverted. Shadows fighting light, but the shadows bled gold. And at the center, a black sun, dripping not fire but memory. Harrow's last message, before her signal vanished, included a rendering of the Omega Star chart, an astrological grid allegedly created by the Babylonian Brotherhood to track the crossing of the celestial inversion point. She claimed we were already past it. The stars no longer shone. They reflected something else. Something not born of fire, but of intention. Now, across the globe, mirrors are breaking. Not shattering, but turning dark, as if absorbing light into themselves. Psychics report lucid visions of cities turned inward, oceans hanging in the sky, and pyramids floating beneath them like teeth. And at the center of it all, the phrase returns like a haunting breath. etched in stone, whispered in dreams, burned behind the eyes of those who see too far. As above, so below. As within, so without. As the end, so the beginning. But one line remains untranslated, cut into a buried monolith in Siberia, locked in a language even AI cannot decode. All attempts to read it result in corrupted files, seizures, or worse. Yet those who survive exposure to the glyph all describe the same dream. An ancient city built of mirrored stone. No sun, no sky, just endless corridors, and something at the center, pulsing like a heart too large for its cage. In the dead lands of Siberia, where compasses spin without aim and the auroras dance out of season, a subterranean complex of unknown origin has begun to resonate. Once hidden beneath permafrost, it now pulses beneath bare stone, warmed not by magma, but by memory. The resonance is unlike anything ever recorded. It does not rise or fall. It holds. A constant tone, deep and unyielding, that no human ear can bear to hear for long. A multinational expedition was formed in silence, not by governments, but by those above them. The unseen custodians who curate knowledge too volatile for the public mind. Among them, linguists, geomancers, remote viewers, and one man who had never spoken since he saw his own death reflected in the collider's mirrored panel. The journey to the complex was uneventful until they crossed the 7th magnetic null zone. Then the instruments failed. The clocks stopped. The dreams began. Each member, on the same night, dreamed of the city again, the mirrored city with the breathing stone at its center. But this time it noticed them. Within the complex they found no doors, only smooth, perfect corridors carved with impossible geometry. Angles that made the eyes water. Corners that should not exist in three-dimensional space. At the heart, a sphere, hovering silently, its surface as black as absence itself. When approached, it reacted, not physically but mentally. Each person felt it differently. Some heard music, others saw memories. One man, aged 12 years in an instant. Dr. Harrow's voice, previously lost in the digital void, now echoed within the minds of the explorers, not in words, but in knowing. She had not died, she had passed through. The mirror, she claimed, is not a metaphor, it is a machine, a boundary, a verdict. It separates not just above and below, but truth from reflection, and someone, something had crossed the threshold. Satellite images ceased functioning over key global coordinates, Baalbek, Easter Island, the Piton de la Fournaise. In their place, static formed in patterns, fractals of mirrored geometry. When deciphered, they spelled an impossible warning. Above has been reversed, below has taken its breath. The moon, long regarded as the mirror of Earth, began shifting its orbital signature, not drifting but responding. Lunar seismic activity surged, and ancient reels opened to reveal deep, hexagonal structures never before mapped. Signals began pulsing from Tycho crater, encoded in rhythms matching the human heartbeat, but slightly faster, as if anticipating something. Under the Vatican, the Black Pope, keeper of the forbidden liturgies, was found kneeling in a salt circle, eyes sealed shut with wax, whispering in reverse Latin, "He who gazes upward to ascend shall be pulled downward by his echo." Around him were maps, all identical, of a world turned inside out. In the deserts of Mauritania, the eye of the Sahara began glowing faintly at night, its stone rings reflecting star patterns not visible from Earth. Ancient texts, once thought apocryphal, described the eye as the first mirror, a wound in the earth through which the above once bled into the below, and it is opening again. Global weather patterns broke free from predictability. Storms began spiraling in geometric formations. Lightning split not downward but upward, connecting ground to stars in sacred angles. Monks in Tibet began chanting verses long forbidden by their own orders, verses describing a second earth, folded like a paper swan, hidden behind this one, accessible only through absolute inversion of the soul. The complex in Siberia has grown quiet now, not silent, attentive, as if waiting for someone to speak the final word. But no one knows what that word is, or perhaps they do and dare not say it. The sphere at its center no longer hovers. It rises, millimeter by millimeter, toward the surface. Across every ancient civilization, across cultures that never touched, one image repeats. Two figures, identical in shape, opposed in form, locked in a spiral. One reaches upward, the other descends. Between them, a single phrase written in forgotten tongues: "He who completes the mirror shatters the real." There are places now where reflections appear before their source, where shadows linger too long, where dreams repeat, not in sleep, but in waking life. People report conversations happening twice, once with meaning, once without. Something is glitching, something is aligning. And now the phrase returns once more. Not in whispers but in thunder, not as metaphor but command. As above, so below. As within, so without. As the end, so the beginning. As the mirror, so the gate. But one final line, never written, never spoken, is coming to light. Buried not in scripture, not in stone, but in the fabric of the world itself. It is awakening beneath us, above us, inside us. And when it speaks, the mirror will not show us ourselves. It will show us what we were always trying not to see. The last reflection is the first truth. The mirror rises.